everything. There comes a point in life when you realize your mind is either your greatest ally or your greatest enemy. Every dream, every goal, everything, every breakthrough you'll ever experience begins not in the world outside, but in the thoughts you allow to live inside your head. Everything. The difference between staying stuck and rising unstoppable isn't luck, it's mindset. And when you transform your mindset, everything, you don't just change how you think, you change how you live. This audiobook is your guide to that transformation, a journey of rewiring the patterns that hold you back. Everything, unlocking the beliefs that move you forward, and stepping into a version of yourself that's driven, disciplined, and free. Everything. There's a moment in every person's life when they stop and realize that the biggest walls around them aren't built from circumstance, but from belief. Everything. Not the kind of belief that lifts you up, but the kind that quietly tells you who you're not, what you can't do, and why you'll never quite be enough. Everything. These invisible barriers don't announce themselves. They live quietly in the background, disguised as logic, caution, or just the way things are. And for most people, everything, they run the show. Think about it. Every action you take, every risk you avoid, every opportunity you hesitate on, everything comes from a thought you've believed for so long that it feels like truth. Maybe it's the voice that says, everything, I'm not good with people, so you stay quiet when you want to speak. Or the whisper that says, I'm not ready yet, so you never apply, never start, never try. Everything. Limiting beliefs aren't loud. They're subtle. They don't argue with you. They agree. And that's what makes them dangerous. Everything. The first step to resetting your mind is to see these beliefs for what they really are. Learned patterns, not permanent truths. No one is born thinking they're unworthy or incapable. Everything. Those ideas are absorbed over time, from family, from school, from moments when we felt small or unseen. Maybe someone laughed at you when you shared a dream. Everything. Maybe a teacher made you feel like your ideas didn't matter. Or maybe, in your own home, the people around you spoke from their fears, and you mistook their limits for your own. Everything. I once met a man named Daniel who had spent most of his adult life believing he wasn't smart enough to succeed. In school, he struggled with reading. His classmates teased him. Everything. His teachers labeled him, and by the time he graduated, he'd already decided he just wasn't the academic type. For years, that belief shaped everything. The jobs he took, everything. The goals he avoided, even the people he surrounded himself with. But here's what's interesting. Everything. When life forced him to adapt, when his company downsized and he had to learn new skills to survive, he discovered that he could learn fast, think creatively, and even teach others. Everything. What changed wasn't his intelligence. It was his belief about it. That's the power of awareness. When you start asking yourself, everything, who told me this was true? You begin to dismantle the structure of limitation. You realize that much of what holds you back isn't truth. It's memory, it's conditioning, everything. It's the echo of a moment when you decided something about yourself that no longer deserves to define you. Here's the thing about the human mind, it's programmable. Everything. It learns through repetition, emotion, and identity. Everything. If you've repeated something long enough, I'm bad with money. I always attract the wrong people. I never finish what I start. Your subconscious accepts it as fact. Everything. It stops questioning it. It starts filtering your world through it. That's why people keep reliving the same patterns, even when they consciously want change. Everything. They're trying to build a new life on the foundation of old beliefs. To reset your mind, you have to interrupt that cycle. Not by fighting the thoughts, but by exposing them. Everything. The moment you can see a belief, you're no longer controlled by it. You're observing it. And that's the start of freedom. Try this, everything. The next time you catch yourself saying, I can't, or I'm not, pause. Don't rush past it. Ask yourself, everything. Who said that? And, when did I decide this? You'll often trace it back to a single event, something that happened years ago that you've been carrying like a rule book ever since. Everything. That's how most limiting beliefs form through emotion. The mind ties intense feelings to meaning. A failure once becomes a fear forever. But the truth is, everything. You are not the same person who made that old decision. You've grown. You've seen more, lived more, learned more. The belief is outdated. You just haven't rewritten it yet. Everything, and rewriting begins with language. The words you use to describe yourself are the code of your mind. Everything. If you keep saying, I'm not confident, your brain will filter your experiences to confirm it. But if you begin saying, everything, I'm learning to trust myself more each day, you shift from identity to evolution. You stop labeling and start transforming. Everything. It's not about lying to yourself. It's about choosing language that expands you instead of shrinking you. There's a powerful story about a woman named Sophia. For years, everything. She believed she wasn't creative. In her childhood, she once showed her drawings to her older brother, everything, who laughed and said they looked like scribbles. That one moment buried a seed of shame so deep that she never pursued art again. She built a career in finance, logical, predictable, everything and safe. But every time she saw a painting or walked into a gallery, something stirred inside her. One day, after a particularly stressful year, everything, she bought a set of paints just to relieve tension. Within weeks, that non-creative woman was spending her evenings lost in colors, textures, and flow. Everything. She didn't just rediscover art, she rediscovered herself. Years later, she exhibited her work. Everything. The belief that she wasn't creative had been nothing more than a ghost of childhood misunderstanding. We all have those ghosts. They live in the spaces where we once felt embarrassed, everything rejected or small. But the thing about ghosts is, they only have power when you refuse to look at them. Once you turn the light of awareness toward them, they vanish. Everything. Imagine your mind as a garden. The beliefs you've repeated for years are like roots, some strong and nourishing, others tangled and choking new growth. To create a new mindset, everything. You can't just plant new seeds, you have to pull the old weeds. You can't grow confidence in the same soil that's filled with, I'm not enough. You have to uproot it. Everything. You do that through consistent awareness and repetition of new truth. One technique that works powerfully is journaling your beliefs. Everything. Write down the things you tell yourself most often, especially the negative ones. Then, next to each, ask, everything, is this absolutely true? And, what evidence do I have that proves the opposite? You'll be amazed at how flimsy many of your truths really are. When you challenge them, everything, they start to crumble. Let's say you write, I always mess things up. Look at your life. Is that really true? Of course not. You've succeeded before. You've shown courage, skill, everything, kindness, resilience. The problem is, the mind tends to amplify the pain of failure and minimize the power of progress. Everything. It remembers the moments that hurt more vividly than the moments that healed. That's why you have to remind it. Repetition is how you rewire everything. The goal isn't to pretend you have no doubts. It's to choose which thoughts you give authority to. Everyone has insecurities, everything. But the people who rise are the ones who no longer identify with them. They see their self-doubt as a passing cloud, not a permanent forecast. As you grow, everything, you'll notice that some of your old beliefs will try to return. That's natural. The mind craves familiarity, even when it's painful. Everything. But every time you choose a new thought, every time you respond differently, you're strengthening a new neural pathway. It's not instant, but it's real. Everything. Change is built through thousands of small choices that eventually become your new default. Think about how a computer works. If it runs old software, no matter how modern the design looks, everything, it keeps crashing. You can't expect new results while running on outdated mental code. Everything. Resetting your mind is about installing new programming, beliefs that align with the person you want to be, not the person you used to be. Everything. And this is where identity plays its most powerful role. When you change what you believe about yourself, your entire reality begins to rearrange around it. Everything. If you start seeing yourself as disciplined, you'll naturally act with more discipline. If you start believing you're worthy of love, you'll stop settling for half-hearted connections. Everything. The mind follows the story you tell it. So tell a better story. You are not your past. You are not the mistakes you made or the opinions that were projected onto you. Everything. You are the author, and every day you're given a blank page. The question is, are you writing from the limits of yesterday or from the possibilities of today? Everything. The greatest freedom you'll ever experience isn't changing your circumstances. It's realizing you can change your mind. Because once your mind is free, the rest of your life follows. Everything. It's like unlocking a door that's been closed for years, only to discover the key was in your hand the entire time. Everything. Every belief you outgrow makes room for a new version of you to emerge stronger, clearer, more aligned. Everything. And once you experience that power, the power of consciously choosing your thoughts, you'll never go back to being who you were. You'll see the world differently. Everything. You'll see yourself differently. And that's where true transformation begins. Not with the world changing everything, but with you realizing that you always had the power to change it from within. There's a moment everyone faces on the path to change. That quiet, everything, unseen decision between doing what's easy and doing what's necessary. The spark of motivation feels incredible in the beginning. It lights up your mind, fills your chest with energy, everything. Makes you believe you can do anything. But as the days pass and the emotion fades, that spark disappears. What's left is the real test: discipline, everything. The invisible muscle that separates dreamers from doers. The truth is, motivation can start your journey, but only discipline will finish it. Transformation is not a single event, everything. It's not a breakthrough that happens overnight or a sudden flash of clarity that changes everything. Transformation is repetition. The small, everything, consistent actions that seem insignificant in the moment, but compound into something extraordinary over time. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, everything, you're not just checking a box or completing a task, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're training your subconscious to believe that you follow through, that you can be trusted, everything, that you're someone who does what they say they'll do. Think about that. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens your internal identity. Every time you say, everything, I'll do it tomorrow, and actually do, you're building evidence that you are dependable, not to others, but to yourself. And that kind of self-trust, everything, that's where real confidence comes from. Because confidence isn't built from results, it's built from repetition. Imagine someone trying to get in shape. The first few days, everything, they're filled with motivation, new workout clothes, new playlist, new goals. But when soreness hits and the novelty fades, discipline has to take over. Everything. If they show up consistently, not perfectly, but consistently, their brain begins to associate movement with identity. I am someone who takes care of my body. Over time, everything. This becomes automatic. It's no longer a struggle because the subconscious mind has accepted a new truth. The same principle applies to every area of your life: finances, focus, everything. Emotional control, creativity, relationships. What you repeat, you become. The subconscious mind doesn't respond to wishful thinking or big dreams. Everything. It responds to what you do over and over again. It's like wet clay taking shape from whatever your habits mold it into. Everything. That's why daily discipline is so powerful. It's the sculptor of your future self. Every disciplined act sends a message to your subconscious. This is who I am now. And eventually, everything. That message becomes your default reality. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is believing that discipline makes life smaller. They think it's about restriction or rigidity. Everything. But discipline isn't about limiting your life. It's about freeing yourself from chaos. It's about choosing structure so you can build peace. Without discipline, your emotions, everything, impulses, and environment control you. With discipline, you control them. And that control doesn't suffocate your freedom. It creates it. Think of a musician. To the world, everything, their performance looks effortless. Fingers moving with grace, rhythm flowing naturally. But behind that ease lies hours, days, years of repetitive practice. Everything scales repeated until they became instinct. At first, it was work. Later, it became art. That's what daily discipline does. It turns effort into ease. Everything. The uncomfortable repetition you resist now becomes the automatic strength you rely on later. There's a saying, if you don't control your habits will control you. Everything. And it's true. Most people live life on autopilot, repeating patterns they didn't consciously choose. They wake up, check their phone, rush through the day, procrastinate, overthink, everything, and repeat. Then they wonder why nothing changes. The answer isn't that they lack motivation. It's that they haven't rewired their patterns. Everything. The mind doesn't change through inspiration, it changes through instruction. And discipline is the language it understands best. Everything. Let's be honest. Discipline doesn't always feel good. It's uncomfortable. It's boring. It's the resistance you feel when your alarm goes off and you'd rather stay in bed. Everything. When you need to study instead of scrolling. When you want to react emotionally but choose patience instead. That friction you feel in those moments. That's the rewiring process. Everything. It's your brain fighting for its old comfort zone. But every time you push through that resistance, even just a little, you're breaking an old neural pathway and building a stronger one. Everything. You don't have to be perfect to reprogram your mind. You just have to be consistent. Even if you fail one day, show up the next. The brain doesn't demand perfection. Everything. It demands persistence, because what matters isn't intensity, it's continuity. 1,000 small, consistent efforts are infinitely more powerful than one burst of inspiration. Everything. There's a story of a man who wanted to change his life. Every morning, he decided to make his bed, that's it. A small act, something so ordinary it seemed pointless. But after a month, something shifted. He started eating better, exercising, showing up earlier to work. Why? Because by mastering one small habit, he began to trust himself again. Everything. That tiny act of daily discipline sent a powerful message to his subconscious: I am capable of consistency. And once the mind accepts that, the body follows. Everything. Discipline isn't punishment, it's preparation. Every repetition prepares you for the life you say you want. You can't wait for confidence before you act. Everything. You act your way into confidence. You don't wait for clarity, you move your way into it. Every disciplined choice is a vote for the future you're building, even when it feels invisible. Everything. And that's the hardest part, staying consistent when you can't yet see the results. But remember, growth always happens in silence before it shows in sight. Everything. Think of a seed underground. For weeks, there's no visible sign of progress. But beneath the surface, roots are forming, foundations are strengthening. Then one day, it breaks through the soil. Not because of one big effort, but because of quiet, consistent growth. That's what discipline does for you. Everything. It grows you from within until the world can't help but notice. You might not always feel motivated, but that's okay. Everything. Discipline isn't about feeling like it. It's about doing it anyway. The most successful people in the world aren't the most inspired, they're the most consistent. Everything. They've learned to separate emotion from execution. They don't wait for the mood to be right, because they know moods come and go, but habits stay. Everything. They move forward because they made a decision long ago that their goals mattered more than their feelings. One powerful way to build discipline is through small, non-negotiable routines. Everything. Pick 1 or 2 simple actions that anchor your day. Journaling for 5 minutes, exercising, reading a few pages, meditating, waking up early. Keep them small, keep them steady. Everything. And never skip them. These rituals act as a signal to your subconscious. I am someone who follows through. Over time, the identity becomes stronger than the resistance. Everything. You no longer have to fight for motivation. Your habits carry you. You see, daily discipline is not just about achievement. It's about identity creation. Everything. It's about becoming someone who respects their own word. Someone whose actions align with their intentions. That's the real transformation. Not just doing better, but becoming better. Everything. There will be days when you fall short, when you question your progress, when you feel like it's not working. But remember, discipline doesn't mean you never fail. Everything. It means you don't quit. Every time you stand back up, your mind learns resilience. Every comeback strengthens your character. And one day, everything. What used to feel like effort will feel like instinct. At the core of it all, discipline is an act of self-love. It's saying, everything. I believe in my future enough to stay consistent today. It's understanding that freedom isn't the absence of responsibility, it's the mastery of it. Everything. It's the quiet pride that comes from knowing you're not at the mercy of your impulses, but guided by your intention. When you live with daily discipline, everything, you no longer chase success, you attract it. Because discipline shapes the kind of person success wants to stay with. It builds calm confidence, quiet strength, and lasting peace. Everything. It makes you unstoppable, not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. So the next time you find yourself waiting for motivation, everything. Remember this, you don't need to feel ready. You just need to begin, because every disciplined step you take is rewriting your mind, your habits, and your life. And one day, everything. You'll look back and realize that what once took effort now flows effortlessly. Because through discipline, you didn't just change what you do, you changed who you are. Everything. There's a moment in everyone's life when pain becomes the loudest teacher in the room. It's that sinking silence after an argument that cuts deep. Everything. The phone call that changes everything. The quiet hours when you question if you'll ever feel like yourself again. In those moments, the easy thing to do is to push it down. To numb it, everything, distract from it, or pretend it doesn't matter. But the truth is, what we avoid only grows stronger. Everything. Real growth begins the moment you stop running from your emotions and start listening to them. Because pain, when faced with awareness, becomes power. Everything. Think about it. The people you admire most aren't those who've had it easy. They're the ones who've been through storms and somehow turned the rain into something meaningful. Everything. They didn't escape pain, they evolved through it. Emotional mastery isn't about becoming cold or detached. Everything. It's about becoming deeply self-aware, learning to understand what you feel, why you feel it, everything, and how to channel that energy towards something that serves your growth instead of sabotaging it. Let's start with the truth most people never say out loud. Everything. Emotional pain doesn't make you weak. It means you care, you feel, you're alive. The real weakness is when we let those emotions control our reactions without understanding their message. Everything. Every emotion carries information. Anger might be pointing to a boundary that's been crossed. Sadness might be revealing something you need to release. Everything. Anxiety might be showing you an area of life that's uncertain or misaligned. When you can see emotions not as enemies but as signals, everything, you stop being a victim of them and start using them as tools. Take the story of Michael, a young entrepreneur who poured everything into his first business. Time, energy, everything, every dollar he had. When it failed, he felt humiliated and angry at himself. For months, he replayed every mistake, each one echoing like a reminder of his worthlessness. But one day, everything, sitting in his empty office, he realized his pain wasn't about the failure itself. It was about the meaning he attached to it. He believed failure meant he wasn't enough. Everything. That belief had been planted years before, by parents who equated love with achievement, by teachers who praised results over effort. Once he recognized that, something shifted. Everything. The pain didn't disappear, but it became fuel. He used it to rebuild, this time with emotional clarity. Within 2 years, everything. His new company not only succeeded, but grew faster than the first ever did. What changed? His mind. He didn't avoid the pain, he mined it for wisdom. Everything. That's what emotional mastery looks like. Not suppressing emotions, but transforming them. When something hurts, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "Everything. What is this teaching me?" That small shift rewires your relationship with discomfort. You stop seeing pain as punishment and start seeing it as preparation. Everything. Every challenge becomes an invitation to know yourself on a deeper level. We live in a world that glorifies strength but misunderstands it. Strength isn't pretending everything is fine. Everything. It's sitting in your pain long enough to understand what it's trying to show you. It's having the courage to face your reflection when it's uncomfortable. Everything. To look at the parts of yourself you've avoided and to meet them with compassion instead of judgment. Because emotional mastery begins with self-compassion. Everything. You can't regulate emotions you're ashamed to feel. Here's a truth worth remembering: emotion itself is neutral. It's the story you attach to it that determines its power over you. Everything. Imagine 2 people losing their jobs on the same day. One spirals into despair, convinced life is unfair. The other feels the same fear, the same uncertainty. Everything. But sees it as an opportunity to redefine their path. The external situation is identical. The inner narrative makes all the difference. That's the essence of emotional mastery. Everything. Learning to pause between feeling and reaction to rewrite the story before it controls you. When you practice emotional awareness, you begin to notice patterns. Everything. Maybe you realize you get defensive whenever someone questions you. Not because of what they said, but because deep down, you equate criticism with rejection. Everything. Maybe you notice you shut down when people disappoint you. Not because they don't care, but because you learned early on that vulnerability leads to hurt. Everything. These patterns don't define you, but they do shape how you respond to the world until you become aware of them. Once you see them, you have a choice. Everything. The key to emotional intelligence isn't control, it's connection. Control implies suppression, while connection implies understanding. You connect with your emotions by naming them. Everything. That's why therapists and neuroscientists alike emphasize emotional labeling. Everything. When you can name what you feel, "I'm anxious, I'm jealous, I'm hurt," your brain activates the prefrontal cortex. Everything. The rational part that regulates emotional response. In other words, naming the emotion begins to calm it. It's like turning on the light in a dark room. The shadows lose their power. Everything. Let's ground this in a simple practice. The next time you feel overwhelmed by emotion, pause. Take a slow, deep breath. Ask yourself 3 questions. What am I feeling right now? Everything. Where do I feel it in my body? And what might this emotion be trying to tell me? You might be surprised by what surfaces. Sometimes anger is really sadness in disguise. Everything. Sometimes anxiety is your intuition nudging you to act. The more you practice this, the more fluent you become in your own emotional language. Everything. But awareness alone isn't enough. You must also learn regulation. Emotional regulation doesn't mean denying what you feel. It means directing that energy constructively. Everything. Think of emotion as raw electricity, powerful, but dangerous without direction. Techniques like deep breathing, mindfulness, journaling, or physical exercise help you regulate that energy. Everything. They don't erase emotion, but they prevent it from consuming you. Over time, this self-regulation builds resilience. Everything. You'll start noticing that situations which once triggered you no longer hold the same power. Someone's criticism that would have ruined your day becomes just feedback. Everything. A setback that once felt like the end becomes an opportunity for recalibration. That's when you realize you're no longer reacting. You're responding. That shift, subtle yet profound, everything, is the mark of emotional growth. Consider how this applies to relationships. Most conflicts don't come from what's said, but from unprocessed emotions underneath. Everything. Emotional mastery allows you to communicate with clarity instead of defense. It helps you listen not just to others, but to yourself. To the fear beneath the anger. Everything. The longing beneath the frustration. When you can understand your emotional truth, you no longer project it onto others. You create peace from within. Everything. And that peace changes how you connect with everyone around you. Pain, when processed consciously, becomes wisdom. Every heartbreak teaches empathy. Every disappointment teaches patience. Everything. Every failure teaches humility. You start to see that life isn't testing you. It's training you. The same way muscles grow through resistance. Everything. Your emotional capacity grows through challenge. The people who've been through the most often have the deepest understanding of life because they've learned to find purpose in the pain. Everything. You might think of someone who's been through unimaginable loss yet radiates calm and compassion. They're not unfeeling. They've simply learned that pain doesn't have to destroy you. Everything. It can awaken you. It can strip away the illusions, the ego, the noise, until what's left is real strength. That kind of strength is quiet, not loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. Everything. It moves through life with grace because it's built on understanding, not avoidance. And here's the paradox: when you stop fighting your emotions, they stop controlling you. Everything. When you stop labeling pain as bad, it becomes less intimidating. Every emotion wants one thing: to be felt. Once it's acknowledged, it passes. But when you suppress it, everything. It lingers, growing heavier each time it's ignored. Emotional mastery is the art of feeling deeply without losing yourself in the feeling. Everything. It's waking up on a hard day and choosing to breathe through the storm instead of running from it. It's standing in front of your reflection and saying, "Yes, I'm hurting, everything, but I'm healing." It's having the courage to stay present when your instinct is to escape, because presence, even in pain, is power. And as you grow in this awareness, everything, you'll notice something remarkable. The very emotions that once held you back become the ones that move you forward. The anger becomes drive. The sadness becomes empathy. Everything. The fear becomes focus. You begin to alchemize your emotions, to turn pain into purpose, chaos into clarity. You don't need a perfect life to feel peace. Everything. You need the skill to meet life as it is and the wisdom to transform what you feel into something meaningful. That is emotional mastery, not a life without pain. Everything. But a life where pain has purpose. It's the foundation of true strength, the kind that doesn't waver when life gets hard. Everything. Because once you've learned to face your own emotions with courage, nothing outside of you can break you. You stop fearing the storm. Because you've already found your calm within it. Everything. Perspective is everything. Two people can live through the exact same moment and walk away with completely different stories. One sees defeat, the other sees direction. One sees failure, everything. The other sees feedback. The event is neutral. It's the meaning we give it that defines how it shapes us. And that's the quiet truth about life most people never realize. Everything. You don't experience reality as it is, you experience it as you are. Think back to a moment that once broke you. Maybe it was a rejection that crushed your confidence. Everything. A plan that fell apart right when you thought you had it figured out, or a betrayal that left you questioning your worth. At the time, it felt final, like something in you had ended. Everything. But now, from the distance of hindsight, can you see how it taught you something? How it carved wisdom where pain once lived? That's perspective. It doesn't erase what happened, everything, but it changes how you carry it. And when you master that shift, You begin to see every difficulty as a teacher disguised in chaos. Everything. I once heard a story about a young athlete, a sprinter who dreamed of competing internationally. He trained for years, giving everything he had to the sport. Then one season, everything. A serious injury took him out completely. In an instant, his entire identity crumbled. He spiraled, frustrated, angry, questioning why this had happened to him. Everything. Months passed before he began to heal, and in that silence he started to reflect. For the first time, he read about sports psychology, nutrition, and coaching. Eventually, everything. He realized he loved the mental side of performance even more than the physical. That injury, the one he thought had ruined him, became the doorway to his true calling. Years later, everything. He became a world-class mindset coach, guiding other athletes through the very struggles he once faced. His pain became his purpose. That story isn't rare. Everything. It's what happens when someone stops asking, "Why me?" and starts asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Perspective transforms the same moment of loss into a moment of growth. Everything. It's not denial. It's power. It's not pretending everything is fine, but choosing to believe that even when things aren't fine, they can still serve you. The truth is everything. We all live within the frame we build in our minds. If that frame is filled with blame, fear, and helplessness, then every event will look like proof that life is unfair. Everything. But if that frame is built with curiosity, courage, and faith, then even chaos looks like a chance to evolve. You can't always control what happens, everything, but you can always control the lens through which you see it. And that single decision can change the entire direction of your life. Let's make this real. Imagine losing your job. Everything. Most people's first reaction would be panic, shame, or frustration. The mind screams, everything. I failed. Or, what will people think? But look deeper. That job might have been draining you, dulling your potential, keeping you small. Everything. What if this loss is actually life redirecting you toward something better? Maybe it's the push you needed to start the business you've been dreaming about, to learn new skills. Everything. Or to step into a version of yourself that no longer settles. Perspective doesn't change the situation immediately. It changes you in the situation. And when you change everything, the world begins to rearrange itself around that energy. This isn't blind optimism. It's trained perception. The most successful people in any field have mastered it. Everything. They've learned to extract lessons faster than others, to look for opportunity while others look for pity. They don't escape problems. They evolve through them. Everything. They ask better questions. Instead of saying, "This isn't fair," they say, "What can I do with this?" Instead of saying, "I'm stuck," they say, "Everything. What is this trying to show me?" And that small mental shift creates a world of difference in how they act, react, and move forward. Think about Thomas Edison. He famously said, "Everything. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's not just clever language, it's mindset mastery. Everything. Imagine going through thousands of failed experiments and still choosing to see progress instead of defeat. Everything. His success didn't come from luck. It came from refusing to label his setbacks as final. Every attempt, even the ones that didn't work, moved him closer to what eventually did. Everything. But let's bring it closer to your life. Because perspective isn't something you apply only in history books or success stories. Everything. It's something you use on an ordinary Tuesday when things don't go as planned. When someone misunderstands you, when you miss a deadline. Everything. When plans fall through, you have a split second to decide how to frame it. Do you make it personal or do you make it purposeful? Everything. That moment of choice defines the level of peace you carry through the rest of the day. The mind is powerful, but it's also trainable. Everything. You can teach yourself to catch the spiral before it drags you down. When something goes wrong, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. 1. Is this situation permanent? Everything. Or temporary? Most of the time it's temporary. 2. What can I learn from this right now? There's always something, even if it's patience or self-awareness. Everything. And 3. How would my strongest self handle this? Because that version of you, the one you're becoming, already knows the answer. Everything. These questions create a gap between reaction and response, and in that gap lies power. Perspective isn't about avoiding pain, it's about giving pain meaning. Everything. It's about seeing the bigger picture even when you're standing in the middle of the storm. You've probably met people who seem unshakable. No matter what happens, they find calm. Everything. They're not superhuman, They've simply learned to view life through a lens of acceptance and growth. They don't waste energy resisting reality. They flow with it, everything, trusting that life's timing and lessons will make sense in the long run. You can cultivate that same peace, everything. It starts by catching the small moments when your mind wants to label something as bad. Ask yourself, what if it's not bad, everything? What if it's just different than what I expected? Because often, what feels like rejection is actually protection. What feels like delay is often redirection, everything. What feels like an ending is the beginning of a new version of you. But you can't see that if you're only focused on what went wrong, everything. You have to lift your gaze and look for what's possible. Perspective is like light. It can't remove the darkness, but it can help you see through it. And when you start to see clearly everything, the fear loses its grip. Suddenly, the things that once intimidated you become manageable. The failures that once embarrassed you become stories of strength. You begin to live lighter, freer, everything, more intentional. Because your peace no longer depends on perfect circumstances. Let's bring in a simple exercise, one you can use anytime life throws something unexpected your way. Everything. Take a sheet of paper and divide it in two. On the left, write the event. Describe what happened, just the facts without emotion. On the right, everything. Write possible meaning. Ask yourself, what might this be teaching me? Or, how could this benefit me in the long run? By separating fact from interpretation, everything, you give your mind space to reframe the experience. Over time, this practice becomes automatic. Your first instinct shifts from victimhood to growth. When you start living this way, everything, you realize that perspective isn't just a mental skill. It's a spiritual practice. It's the quiet confidence that everything in your life is working for you, everything, not against you. Even when it doesn't look that way yet, it's knowing that storms aren't sent to destroy you but to clear paths you wouldn't have seen otherwise. Everything. Some of the greatest transformations happen when everything seems to be falling apart. Because that's when life forces you to look deeper, to ask harder questions, everything, to let go of what no longer fits. Pain opens your eyes in a way comfort never can. But whether that pain becomes suffering or strength depends on the meaning you give it. Everything. Perspective is the bridge between despair and wisdom. Every challenge carries two stories inside it, the one that breaks you and the one that builds you. Everything. Which one you tell yourself determines which one becomes true. So when life tests you, and it will, pause before you decide what the moment means. Everything. Because the meaning you choose becomes the lens you live through. And once you learn to see opportunity where others see only obstacles, something profound happens. Everything. Life no longer feels like it's happening to you, but for you. You stop fearing change. You stop clinging to control. You start trusting that whatever comes, everything, you'll grow through it. And that's the quiet superpower of perspective. There comes a time when you stop chasing approval, stop trying to prove, and start simply becoming everything. Becoming who you were meant to be before the world told you who to be. This is the essence of living as your highest self, not a version sculpted by fear, by doubt, everything, or by other people's expectations, but the version of you that's powerful, calm, and certain. The version that doesn't need validation to move forward. Everything. That doesn't crumble when things get quiet. That knows who they are even when no one's watching. Most people spend their lives reacting to the world instead of directing it. Everything. They wake up in response to noise, to messages, responsibilities, opinions, and they forget that their own mind is the most powerful instrument they have. Everything. Becoming unstoppable starts with taking back that control. It's not about being hard or emotionless, it's about being grounded. Everything. The kind of grounded that can't be shaken by temporary storms. Think about a mountain. No matter how fierce the winds blow, the mountain doesn't move. It doesn't need to fight back. Everything, it just is. Strong, silent, unbothered. When you live as your highest self, that's what you become, solid in who you are. The world can spin, people can doubt you, everything. Situations can test you, but your sense of worth remains unmoved. You're not searching for peace anymore, you are peace. To live that way, you must first stop defining yourself by moments. Everything. The failure that happened 5 years ago, the rejection you still replay in your mind, the mistake you think defines you. None of that is you. Those were experiences, not your identity. Everything. Your highest self doesn't live in the past. It learns from it and lets go. It doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to be present. You see, everything. Personal growth is not about adding more layers to yourself. It's about peeling them off. All the false identities, the stories, the limitations that don't belong to you, everything. When you strip away the noise, what's left is something rare as self-trust. And self-trust is what makes a person unstoppable. Because when you trust yourself, you don't hesitate. Everything. You don't overthink every move. You move with quiet conviction, knowing that even if things go wrong, you'll figure it out. That inner faith frees you from fear. Let's take an example. Everything. Imagine two people chasing the same goal. One doubts every step, worries about what others think, and constantly looks around for signs of approval. Everything. The other keeps their eyes forward. They act, they adjust, they stay consistent. The second person wins not because they're smarter or luckier, but because they're anchored. Everything. Their energy doesn't leak into doubt or insecurity. That's what it means to be unstoppable, not that you never fall, but that nothing can make you stay down. Everything. There's a quiet power in people who move with certainty. They don't need to shout about their plans or prove their progress to anyone. Everything. You can feel it in their presence. A calm confidence that says, I know where I'm going. That's what you're building inside yourself. And it starts with alignment. Everything. When your values, your actions, and your words line up, you create harmony within. There's no inner war, no conflict between who you are and who you pretend to be. Alignment creates power. Everything. And that power radiates in everything you do. You don't have to wait for confidence to arrive before you start. Confidence is born through action. Everything. Every time you follow through on what you said you'd do, you prove to yourself that you can be trusted. And each of those small acts adds up. Everything. That's how people rise. Not through one grand moment, but through hundreds of small, private victories that no one sees. You wake up one day and realize everything. You've become the kind of person who no longer doubts their own capability. That's transformation. Living as your highest self also means protecting your peace. Everything. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every opinion deserves your attention. You begin to understand that silence is a strength. That you don't owe explanations to everyone. Everything. The more you grow, the more you'll be misunderstood. But that's the price of authenticity. You stop shrinking to fit places you've outgrown. Everything. You stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. You simply walk forward, understanding that not everyone is meant to understand your journey. Everything. There's something deeply liberating about being your own source of validation. You no longer chase recognition, you give it to yourself. You acknowledge your own effort. Everything. You celebrate your own progress. That's where unshakable confidence comes from within. External approval can feel good, but it's temporary. Self-respect lasts. Everything. When you can look at yourself and know that you showed up with integrity, that you stayed true to your values even when no one was clapping. That's real power. Everything. Many people mistake being unstoppable for being aggressive, loud, or relentless. But true strength is quieter. It's the patience to keep going when things take longer than you planned. Everything. It's the humility to learn instead of defend. It's the ability to remain kind without being naive. Being unstoppable isn't about crushing everything in your path. Everything. It's about refusing to be broken by what happens along the way. There will be days when your energy drops, when motivation fades, when progress feels invisible. Everything. Those are the days that shape you the most. Because that's when discipline steps in. That's when your higher self whispers, everything, keep going. The unstoppable version of you doesn't rely on inspiration. They rely on identity. You no longer ask, can I do this? You say, everything. This is who I am. And who you are is someone who follows through, who adapts, who rises. Think of every challenge you've faced up to now. Each one was training. Each heartbreak, everything. Each setback, each doubt was strengthening something inside you, preparing you for a version of yourself that could not be shaken by small things anymore. Everything. Sometimes growth disguises itself as loss. Sometimes life takes away what's safe so you can learn to stand on your own. That's not punishment, that's evolution. Everything. Your highest self doesn't need everything to be easy. It thrives in pressure because it knows pressure creates diamonds. When things get heavy, that version of you doesn't panic. Everything. It breathes. It looks at the chaos and says, I've been here before. I know how to handle this. That calmness is a superpower. Everything. And it's built through experience. Through all the moments you thought you couldn't handle but did. To become unstoppable, you must also learn to forgive yourself. Everything. Not just for the big things, but for the moments you forgot your worth, for the times you stayed too long where you didn't belong, for the choices made out of fear, everything. Forgiveness clears the path forward. You can't carry old guilt and still walk freely into your future. The highest version of you doesn't dwell on the past, everything. They extract the wisdom and move on lighter. So much of becoming your best self is about subtraction, not addition. Subtract the noise, the comparisons, the distractions that keep you small, everything. Growth doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, invisible. It's the way you no longer respond to negativity. The way you pause instead of react, everything. The way you choose peace over validation. Those are the invisible victories that mark your evolution. And then one day, without even realizing it, everything. You'll look around and feel a deep sense of inner freedom. You won't need to force anything anymore. You'll just be. You'll trust yourself, move with ease, and handle life with grace, everything. You'll understand that your value isn't determined by outcomes, but by presence, by how you show up in the moment. That's when you've crossed from effort into embodiment, everything. You've stopped chasing growth and started living it. Becoming unstoppable isn't about never feeling fear again. It's about knowing that fear doesn't get to decide your story, everything. It can speak, but it doesn't get to lead. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking forward despite it. Every person you've ever admired, every leader, creator, everything or visionary, has felt fear. The difference is, they didn't let it paralyze them. They kept moving, kept learning, kept believing in their own capacity to rise. You can too, everything. So as you stand at this point in your journey, remember this: you don't need to wait for permission. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. You've already walked through doubt, everything, through growth, through resistance, and you've emerged wiser. Now, it's about living from that wisdom. Let every action, every word, everything, every choice reflect the truth of who you've become. Move through life like someone who knows their worth, because you do. And as you do, something powerful happens. You stop chasing life, everything, and life starts meeting you halfway. Opportunities align, people resonate, doors open, not because you forced them, everything, but because you finally matched the energy of the person you were always meant to be. That's the moment you realize you don't have to become unstoppable. You already are. You just needed to remember.